Shake comes with a very robust set of signal generators that you can use to create animation curves like sine waves and noise factors. You can then modify them using the techniques we've seen in the previous two movies. Let's try it. We'll go to the Image tab, File In, the pop-up menus, our Assets folders, the Stills, and let's bring in the theme park again. Okay, we'll add a pan node to that. So we'll click on the Transform button and click on Pan. Now let's adjust our windows so that we can see what we're doing. We'll start by working with a sine wave. We'll come to the pan parameter and unfold that. We want to add an expression to xpan, so we'll click on the keyframe button, unfold that, and we'll type sine of time return. Now let's take a look in the curve editor. So we've got this lovely little sine wave created with that very simple function. Now let's play that and watch what happens. Well, we're getting a little waggle left and right, but the problem is the sine wave only returns a value of between -1 and +1, so we're not wiggling very much. Let's fix that. We'll stop the animation. Now let's increase the amplitude so it swings wider, times 10. Whoa, my curve went crazy. Let's bring that back in. Let's get a little more space for our curve. Now the sine value is between -10 and +10. We'll get more wiggle on our monitor. Let's try that. There we go. That's a lot better. But that's really too fast, so let's slow it down. We'll stop that. We'll come up to the sine variable, that's that global variable, remember, and we'll divide that by 3. Look how the sine wave slowed down. And of course now the animation slows down too. But wouldn't it be nice if we could adjust that speed with a variable? Well, let's make one. Right mouse, pop up, create local variable. We'll call it speed. Always use an intuitive name. The slider high value will be 10. The slider low value will be 1. And we want to use floating point. We'll say OK. Shake creates a local parameters where our local variable speed now lives. So let's fold this local variable into our animation curve. Instead of the number 3, we'll divide time by speed. Now as I adjust the speed parameter, you can see how my sine wave is getting longer and therefore slower. Next, I'd like to shift the timing of the sine wave, shift it left or right, so that I could start the animation where I want. The way I do that is I come in here to my time divided by speed, and I add a constant. I add a number to it. See, it shifts it. We'll try another number, shifts it some more. But I don't want to type in numbers, I want another variable. So, right mouse click, create a local variable. This one we'll call offset. And it'll go from 3 to -3. And we'll leave it as a floating point. Say OK. Now our local parameters have speed and offset. So I'm going to take offset and plug it into my expression. And instead of this +2, I'm going to say plus offset. Return. Now I can adjust the offset of the sine wave as well as its speed. And if I wanted to, of course, I could add another variable to adjust the amplitude. Okay, let's reset all values and take a look at the random number generator. We'll unfold this, create an animation curve here, and we'll say random paren, and I'll just put a number in there. Now, the number that's in the parentheses is the seed. This seed will always generate the same random number. So if you just put a constant value, although you'll get a different random number, it's going to hold that for the whole shot. If we wanted to animate every frame, we'll have to put in a changing variable, such as the global variable time. And now we get a random pattern over a period of time. Again, the range of it is between 0 and 1, so I'm going to scale it up by saying times 10. So we'll home that, And now my random number is between 0 and 10. With the random number parameter, you cannot adjust the frequency. If you stretch out the number time like we did for the sine waves, it just keeps generating more random numbers in between. Let's try the noise parameter. The noise parameter is like noise, paren, time. Okay, now let's get our curve editor secured here. Okay, we'll home that. Now we've got a noise pattern, but it also ranges from 0 to 1. Now we're going to show you a new trick. You normally will want these noise or random or sine waves between an upper and a lower value. Let's say we want the noise to be between 200 and 300. Here's how you do that. To set the upper and lower limits to any one of these signal generators, we come down here and we'll say times parentheses. We put the upper value, which is 300, minus the lower value, which is 200, parentheses. Then we add the lower value. So it's the upper limit minus the lower limit plus the lower limit. We hit return. We'll home the curve editor. And now all of our noise is between the value of 200 and 300. Now let's take a look at some turbulence. We'll type in turbulence. Paren. We want to put in a seed number followed by a frequency number. We'll home that. Since I entered a constant, then I'm getting the same turbulent value for every frame, so I want to put in the global variable time as before. Let's home that. Now the second number is the frequency, how to spread it out. So if I go 3, you see the turbulence gets slower and smoother. I can enter 5 and 10. And of course, you can create a variable for that. Now let me show you something really cool. Let's create a new variable, and we'll call it amplitude. And it'll range between 50 and 0, and I want it to be floating point. So I'll say OK. Here's my new variable, amplitude, ranging from 0 to 50. We'll go back to my animation and say times amplitude. Now, my amplitude is 0, so the xpan value became 0. But if I take the amplitude up to 50, adjust the viewer a little bit, here we go, now we can see my turbulence now ranges between 0 and 50. But we can also animate this local variable. I'm on frame 1, I'll hit the keyframe button, I'll set it for 0 on frame 1. I'll come out to the middle of the shot, set it for 50, and then we'll go to the end of the shot and set it for 0 again. Now we'll home the viewer, and look what we have. This is my amplitude parameter here, and now I've got an ease in and an ease out on my turbulence. So watch the viewer as we play through that. So the amplitude gets greater and greater, and then it calms back down to 0 as we get towards the end of the shot. But that's not the really cool thing. Here's the really cool thing. The resulting curve here is a function of the turbulence equation and that amplitude curve. And I can now grab the amplitude curve and adjust it. Isn't that the coolest thing you have ever seen? In this movie, we saw how to use Shake's signal generators to create animation curves, which you can then modify. We saw how to change their amplitude, frequency, shift their timing, and even do it using local variables.